Good evening, everyone. And before we begin the meeting, I'll ask everyone to please silence your cell phones and other electronic devices and remind council that our procedure bylaw prescribes the use of mobile devices for council meetings. It is 6:31 p.m. I'll call this meeting to order. And as I do, I would like to formally recognize the traditional keepers of this land and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation with this formal territorial acknowledgement. We recognize that these are the gunshot treaty lands of 1788. It is on these lands and on the shores of Lake Ontario that the Mississauga and Anishinaabe met with representatives of the Crown to facilitate the opening of these lands for settlement. Let us be reminded of the responsibility we all have in making sure that we respect these lands and waters that give us life and sustain our livelihoods. And before I move to the approval of the agenda, recognizing that we don't have an official announcements portion in the council planning meeting agenda, I would like to point out that the clerk and I took opportunity to hang the new photo of His Majesty. While this is not His Majesty's official Canadian portrait, it is the photo currently being sanctioned by Rideau Hall and the Palace for use in Canada. This photo is of His Majesty when he was Prince of Wales on his last visit to Canada, and the only picture, the only portrait we have of him wearing his Canadian regalia. So until we have an official portrait of the King, Canadian portrait of the King, this is the one that is sanctioned to be used in public halls like ours. And so we look forward to the official one so we can have a new one swap out at some point or another. But until then, it's nice to have the actual monarch in place in our council chambers. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council approve the June 17th, 2024 planning meeting agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. Members of council, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. There are no delegations listed on tonight's agenda, so we open a statutory public meeting with a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council move into the statutory public meeting June 17th, 2024 at 6:33 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Municipality of Brighton takes steps beyond the requirements of the Planning Act to engage the community in land use planning initiatives. The municipality also holds a statutory public meeting on the planning application and then receives a staff report with a recommendation on which council will make a decision. After council has made our decision, any person or public body may appeal council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal as long as they have made an oral submission at this meeting or provided comments in writing to the clerk's office and requested notice of the decision from the clerk's office. This is also true of any person or public body that wishes to participate in the appeal. For details or information on appealing decisions of council, please visit the municipal website or contact the municipal clerk. The first item in our statutory public meeting is Consent B10 2024. The location is 1088 Stony Point Road. The applicants are Draaistra-deWal and Amanda Draaistra-deWal. The purpose is to request a decision from council on a proposed consent. So, Mrs. Deck, by what method and on what date was notice of the consent and application given?
Sorry for the typo there, Mayor.
Okay. Sorry for reading it as it was written.
Notice of the consent application was sent by mail on May 24th, 2024 to all property owners within 60 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all agencies as required under the Planning Act. In addition, a sign notice was also posted on the property.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed consent application?
The purpose of consent application B10 2024 is to facilitate a technical consent cancellation application. The subject lands are currently subject to a previous consent application B09 2023, provisionally approved by council on January 15th, 2024, to facilitate the construction of a new detached garage with an accessory dwelling unit above. During the clearing of conditions, staff identified that the benefiting lot, 1088 Stony Point Road, was created through a previous consent application, B16 2014. Due to the previous consent application, a consent stamp is applied to the benefiting parcel from B09 2023. A consent cancellation application, which is here brought forth, will be required to cancel the previous consent, which will allow the lot addition to continue and to form a modified lot.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. Are there persons present or on Zoom who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent application? None noted. Are there any questions from members of council? Councillor Butwell?
Thank you very much, and through you to Ms. Deck. Just a couple of questions, just clarifying questions. So it was in searching this item, this one pin, that you found that there was already something attached to it. Is that an easy thing to do? Is that a quick little search through a database that we carry? Or is that something that the landowner may have been able to find on their own easily, or how does that work?
Mrs. Deck?
Through you, Mary, yes. So when we're clearing conditions, we sometimes will just look at consent history just as a double check, and it was identified through that in our actual files that it was consented in 2014, as well as when we received the survey as part of the clearing of conditions when we go to register the deeds for a new survey for a lot addition or a new consent application. It was identified that there was a part number that looked like a previous or more up-to-date survey. So that sort of flagged me to look into the consent history, which this was found. This new consent cancellation is somewhat new to planning staff. It was part of Bill 23 and those sort of changes. So the consent cancellation essentially just allows us to remove that previous consent stamp through the term previously used in the Planning Act was once a lot, always a lot. This consent cancellation essentially allows us to remove that part from the benefiting lands and allow the lot addition to essentially stick to that parcel. So as part of it, it is a new technical consent application that the applicant has to apply for. And essentially we just work with the lawyers on making sure that consent stamp is canceled so the lot addition can occur.
Follow-up?
Yes, a quick follow-up. Thank you. So there's no cost to the property owner in any of this that we
Mrs.
stumbled
Deck?
across?
No, there is a technical consent fee for this application.
Okay. And if I can ask one more question, or actually it's two more questions if no one else has any questions.
Is it a new question?
There's a new question.
A new question. Are there any other questions from members of council? Councillor Butwell?
Okay. I noticed that with Lower Trent did not respond. Is that customary? I have not seen one where Lower Trent did not respond.
Through your mayor, Lower Trent responded at the time of the lot addition application. So as part of this, I attached the previous report. But in terms of a consent cancellation, it's not necessarily something that Lower Trent would be commenting on because it's not necessarily part of their regulatory body in terms of this consent cancellation. They would be more worried about any of their features in the regulatory areas. Rather, this is more legalistic in terms.
So just to clarify, more an administrative process that we're going through, like a housekeeping item.
It's hard to say it's not necessarily a housekeeping item. It is more legal in nature, I would say.
And one more quick question, just because I see we have two of these on our agenda this evening. One of them indicates that there was notice given to residents within 60-meter radius and the other one 120-meter radius. What's the difference there? Other than of the obvious 60 meters.
Mrs. Deck?
Through you, Mayor. So as part of this application, this is just a consent application. So with that, the Planning Act prescribes it's only 60 meters notice for consents versus the other application we're seeing is a consent and a rezoning. So that's where that increase happens from 60 meters to 120.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Are there any other questions from members of council? Mrs. Deck, do you have any final comments?
No, I do not, Mayor.
Does council wish to make a decision this evening? No? No? No. Motion before me is moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council receive the staff report dated June 17th, 2024 regarding the subject application for 1088 Stony Point Road, being consent application B10 2024, and further that council grant provisional consent to application B10 2024, subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing of the decision, that a consent cancellation certificate be issued and registered for the subject lands, and the owner provides to the municipality a registrable deed description for use of the issuance of a certificate of official for consent. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. The next is our files B06 2024, B09 2024, and zoning bylaw amendment application. File number Z03 2024. The location is 15580 County Road 2, and the applicant is Michael Allen Vandertoorn. The purpose of the public meeting is to request a decision from council on the proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment to the Municipality of Brighton Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw as amended. Mrs. Deck, by what method and on what date was notice of the consent and zoning bylaw amendment applications given?
Notice of the consent and zoning bylaw amendment application was sent by mail on May 24th, 2024 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. In addition, a signed notice was also posted on the property.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment?
The purpose of consent application B06 2024 is to sever a 2.47 acre portion of the property located at 15580 County Road 2 and add it to the rural property located at 15566 County Road 2. The lot addition application will add an outbuilding, hay storage, paddock area, and part of the riding ring to 15566 County Road 2. There are no changes proposed to the retained parcel. The purpose of consent application B09 2024 is to facilitate a technical consent cancellation application. The benefiting lot as part of application B06 2024 was previously severed in 2019 and 2020, and a consent stamp is applied to the benefiting parcel. A consent cancellation will be required to cancel the previous consent to allow the lot addition application to continue and to form a modified lot. The purpose of zoning bylaw amendment application Z03 2024 will ensure that there is consistent zoning amongst the properties after the lot addition is applied. The zoning bylaw amendment application serves to rezone the portion of the severed property to be added to 15566 County Road 2 from the rural residential zone to the rural exception number 32 zone to ensure consistent zoning with the benefiting property. The current zoning of the retained parcel is to remain as the rural residential zone.
Thank you, Mrs. Deck. Are there persons present or joining us electronically who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment? There are none noted. Questions from council? There are none noted. Any further comments, Mrs. Deck?
No, not at this time, Mayor.
Thank you. And does council wish to make a decision this evening? I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that council received the staff report dated June 17th, 2024 regarding the subject applications for 15580 County Road 2 being consent applications B06 2024 and B09 2024 and zoning bylaw amendment application file Z03 2024. And further, the council enacts a bylaw to rezone the severed portion of the lands to be added to 15566 County Road 2 for rural residential zone to the rural exception number 32 zone. And further, the council grant provisional consent to applications B06 2024 and B09 2024 subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing of the decision. That application for zoning bylaw amendment Z03 2024 is finally approved. Confirmation from the applicant's solicitor that the severed and benefiting lands will merge on title. The solicitor for the applicant shall submit an undertaking to the municipality to the following effect. I hereby personally undertake to prepare and register an application to consolidate parcels for those lands, being the severed lands herein, and those lands being the benefiting lands herein, and provide to the municipality the registered application to consolidate parcels as soon as possible after registration of the severance, transfer, and designation of the new PIN to the severed lands. That subsections 3 and 5 of Section 50 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 shall apply to any subsequent conveyance of or transaction involving the conveyed lands. That a consent cancellation certificate under consent application B09 2024 be issued and registered for the subject lands. All taxes on each of the lots be paid up to date prior to the issuance of a certificate of official. A digital copy of a registrable survey for the lots and the appropriate deed transfer be prepared and deposited with the municipal clerk. The OLS indicate in writing to the Department of Planning and Development that no encroachments of driveways, wells, or septic systems will result from the lot addition conveyances. The surveyor deposit with the municipality a geospatial data file of the surveyed parcel fabric with respect to the severed and retained lands submitted to the satisfaction of the municipality. And the owner provides to the municipality a registrable description on a deed conveying the severed lands for use for the issuance of a certificate of official for consent. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And that brings us to the close of our statutory public meeting with a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council move out of the statutory public meeting June 17th, 2024 at 6:47 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Brings us to planning and development reports. The first report is with regard to Bill 185, Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act 2024, and the proposed provincial policy statement 2024. Director Walsh, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Nothing further to add, Mayor.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council received the staff report for the purposes of information dated June 17th, 2024 regarding Bill 185 and the draft provincial policy statement 2024. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I noticed that it says developments that are able to expedite the building of homes should be given priority. That makes sense, but it struck me that perhaps developments that are aimed at a level of affordability should be given priority. Affordability also implies density, both of which are priorities. It might be that there are, it certainly is that low density developments are faster, but they're not necessarily what we need. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeldon. Any other comment? Councillor Butwell.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Watson and Associates, they have submitted the comments on behalf of the municipality. There was a 30-day comment period. This wasn't brought before council for comment, was it?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay, is there, just because Councillor Wheeldon just asked or made a good observation that we may have had comments to include on that. Perhaps if something like this happens again, staff could bring it to council.
I see the staff are noting that. Thank you. Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next report is with regard to Bill 185, changes to pre-consultation. Mr. Warren, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Nothing further at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council receive the subject staff report regarding Bill 185, changes to pre-consultation, and the council repeal the current pre-consultation bylaw, and the council direct applicants of major development applications to complete public open houses under the direction of the staff of the Department of Planning and Development as part of a complete application prior to its submission. And the staff be directed to prepare a complete application bylaw for council consideration at a future date. Is there any discussion? Mr. Warren, I'm curious if we can get a little background around this. Because the previous council, I guess, went through some fairly significant work to make sure we did the pre-consultation process. I understand that that is perhaps not favorable in the world of we have to get more developments out faster, but in the world of working with our friends and neighbors, it seems to make a lot of sense. And we were quite favorable at this council on the pre-consultation. We felt that it made things a lot smoother, both in the neighborhoods and from a development practices point of view. So I'm curious if are we trying to find a way around the bill by doing this, or are we having to actually pull back what we've put into place?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I would say it's a little bit of both. We're finding our own way around the new regulations under Bill 185, which has now made pre-consultations in general voluntary. But we would like there to be what we consider a special bylaw that goes into what actually encompasses a complete application. We would like that to include public consultation as early on in the process as possible, because what was in place prior to my time here, I think is quite innovative and quite, I don't know if it's necessarily, I don't think it takes any longer. It's just a bit more work needs to be done early on in the process. And I think that's what we're still trying to continue for the same reason.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. I think it made a lot of sense. I'm glad to see we're trying to incorporate it in whatever the new regulation requires us to do. So I appreciate the work staff are doing here. Any other questions or comments from members of council? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next report is the Heritage and History Hunt Program. Ms. Birch, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Not at this time.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receives the staff report for information outlining the Heritage and History Hunt Program running this summer. Is there any discussion? Councillor Butwell.
Thank you very much, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Birch. Really cool idea. I like it. I've seen it online. I never drilled down in to see what it was until I read this report, and then I went, oh, those go together. I did have two questions, actually. So my first question is, as this is written, so if I go to just page 2 at the bottom, it says, once staff has verified submission meets the requirements, participants will receive a coupon that can be redeemed for the following. So the way that it's written, it's for all of the following. So it's not, was that the intent?
Ms. Birch.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Butwell, the certificate that participants will get outlines that they do receive one of the following, and that is made explicit on the coupon
On
card.
the coupon, so it kind of clarifies this. Okay, perfect. So that kind of leads into my question about the financials, which maybe not as relevant at this point. So there's obviously a budget that you're drawing from for the redemption of these submissions. Did you have any estimates, or have you had much involvement so far?
Ms. Birch.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Butwell, at this point, we haven't received any, but we are in kind of the ends of the school year and people aren't quite looking for things to do. So we do expect the uptick to happen kind of in July and August. These are in the park, so we're hoping that visitors will get involved. But our goal is to have about 50 participants partake, and we've kept the prizes about at a $5 range.
Follow-up? Are council able to participate and are eligible for coupons?
Ms. Birch.
Absolutely.
I read some other questions. I don't know the answers. I'd have to drill down, so. Thank you both. Are there any other questions from members of council? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to items for information purposes, conservation lands and area strategy draft for residents review and input. This is an information item. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council received the conservation lands and area strategy draft for information. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. We have nothing listed on unfinished business, which brings us to bylaws. I have the first bylaw is a zoning bylaw amendment Z03-2024 with a motion moved by Councillor Botwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw 140-2002 as otherwise amended of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands located at 1 556 County Road 2 and 15580 County Road 2 legally described as part of Lot 28, Concession A, being Part 1 on Registered Plan 39R, 14267 and part of Lot 28, Concession A, being part of Part 1 on Registered Plan 39R 9717, and Part 1 on Registered Plan 39R 14108. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And that brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery or joining us electronically that has a question with anything that appeared on tonight's agenda? Thank you all. Brings us to a motion to proceed into closed session. I will read the motion. Once the motion is read, we will end the live YouTube stream and we will not be returning to the live YouTube stream for the duration of the meeting. We will also take a 10-minute recess should council choose to pass the motion to proceed into closed session. That motion is moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council resolve itself into closed session on June 17th, 2024 at 6:57 p.m. Pursuant to the Ontario Municipal Act, RSO 2001 as amended, subsection 239(2)E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, for the purposes of receiving a litigation update on OLT 24-000093 appeal. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Council is recessed until 7:06 p.m.